we challenged ourselves to write a Grow and Convert blog post that's published on the GNC site. And this is the first time we're telling anyone that we published a post that was written with AI.
As I was writing the article, I did start at the top and I went down through the sections. Towards the end, I was getting better at using AI and I was learning like when it was useful to use Notebook versus Claude.
And then you sent it to me. My first reaction was like, oh, this is pretty good. And then as I started editing and reading it, me knowing that Katelyn normally is like a great writer, I started to get annoyed where I was just like, man, I gotta like edit like all this stuff. And if Katelyn had just written the piece, I wouldn't have to edit all this.
We've been getting a bunch of questions about AI and more specifically AI writing. We've done the last 2 videos covering our overall thoughts on AI, and then we talked through AI search. And in this one, we wanted to talk through AI writing. Specifically, we challenged ourselves to write a Grow and Convert blog post that's published on the GNC site. And this is the first time we're telling anyone that we published a post that was written with AI. And so we brought Katelyn again to explain how she wrote this post category keywords that is published on our site. And so we kind of just wanted to talk through how we approached writing it with AI, what tools we used, the pros and cons of using AI, whether we're going to continue doing this, and just kind of talk through all of the experience using AI to write content.
And importantly, also how much of it was written by AI. We tried our best to write it with AI. Katelyn edited it.
I edited the AI. You edited me.
Yeah. Katelyn edited the AI, and then I edited some version of the AI / Katelyn and made predictions along the way, some of which were not correct about what was written by AI versus Katelyn. And I should note that Katelyn is an incredibly talented writer on our team. So I thought I could very easily distinguish, but some of them were harder, but some of them were pretty obvious. Katelyn, starting off with kind of the beginning of the process would be great, like what you remember we asked you to do and how you started thinking about it.
Sure. So I think we had some really brief conversations just about, what would it look like to bring AI in and getting that started. And I think you mentioned a couple things about like, hey, you can't just tell it to write the whole article. It's going to be better if you give it a bit of an outline and all of that. Because I was coming at this brand new. So like I hadn't done anything with AI. I hadn't even opened the most popular, AI chat tools. So I was starting from ground zero. And so anyone who's worked with AI, naturally is going to know that there's a big learning curve there. And yeah, that's exactly what I found, is that there's just so much to learn in terms of how to prompt the AI to get what you want, that it's really its own skill.
Okay, which AI tools did you start with first? And I should mention to everyone that the keyword that we were going after for Grow and Convert's own blog was category keywords. Was that the actual SEO keyword? Is just the term category keywords?
Well, it's one that we're trying to coin, right? Or
I think it has volume.
there is volume, but it's not used in the same way that we're talking about it. And there's like a lot of different, if you look at the SERP or when I was writing it, I'm not sure what it looks like now. Every post was a little bit different, and like even when I went to run clear scope so I could add some relevant terms in, one of the relevant terms was like running shoes, and I was like, what does this have to do with anything? So it just, there wasn't any like set understanding from what Google was producing anyway of what
Okay, I think that's a good jumping off point. I actually think instead of talking about which tools we used at the beginning, although maybe we can, it'd be good to just get to the crux of the matter for everyone listening, which I think you kind of hit at, and maybe we can use that as a launching point to get into the details of what you did, which is, you said that I mentioned And by the way, when Katelyn said I came into this new, and Davish mentioned you can't just ask it to write a blog post, you have to ask it to outline. I'm also new at it. So just for the record, we have published 0 pieces for clients that are written by AI. Our natural Grow and Convert's culture is that we are very particular, one may say elitist about our writing. We're kind of proud of that. I'm happy to take responsibility for setting that culture because I'm kind of proud of setting that culture. And so like that's our natural thing, but we don't want to be, ostriches with our head in the sand as AI is taking over. And we're getting close to publishing this survey we did on a bunch of writers and how much they're using AI. And the long story short is that a bunch of like 80% plus are using it in some way. And I think the better way to think about this is AI assistance in writing. Almost no, we did not in this, even in this little project we're talking about today. And in the survey, nobody's just like, well, I shouldn't say nobody, but the vast majority are indicating that they're not just like, hey, like just AI, just write it. And they're just using it, copy and paste from ChatGPT into the post. So this outlining, can you walk through, or do you remember how much you outlined and what you gave it?
Yes.
While Caitlin's pulling that up, just so that everyone can follow along, the vast majority of people listening and following us are in marketing, specifically content marketing. So it'll help you be able to follow the details of what we talk about in terms of the writing being good and bad, if we just give you some background context of this keyword so you can follow along. If you don't know Grow and Convert, right, we write bottom of funnel content, meaning we write for keywords that we think the act of Googling it shows massive buying intent. And one of those, we call that pain point SEO. You can Google that to read more about it. One of those pain point SEO like subcategories is category keywords. There's 3 of them: category keywords, comparisons, and jobs to be done. And category keywords in our terminology means that very specific thing. Keywords that when you type it into Google, it's like you're looking for a product in that category. Examples we always use is best accounting software. For us, it would be content marketing agency, things like that. And in fact, you mentioned running shoes. Running shoes in my mind is kind of a category keyword, because that means if you are an e-commerce company that sells running shoes, that's a category keyword for you.
So I will say that when I started out here, I was experimenting and I wanted to see how far I could push it with the AI, or how much I could have the AI do the work for me, essentially. And so I was trying to give it as little as possible. And then by the end, I was doing a lot more on my own and just having it help me word little things. But if we look at the beginning here, so this is my initial prompt. I told it I was going to have it help me write an article. And then I described a little bit about who the audience is, what their understanding is.
Wait, let me pause you there so this episode will be one that is useful to look on YouTube, but I know a decent amount of people just listen to us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. This is not intuitive, I think. And so if you're using AI and you want to for writing assistance and you want to get better, this itself is interesting. When Katelyn says, I described a little bit about the audience, let me just read the beginning of her prompt out loud for you. Help me write an article that targets the keyword category keywords, fine. The reader is marketing professionals, specifically those involved in SEO and content marketing for SaaS and B2B companies. These individuals are likely to, and she has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bullets that I can see, 6, 7, 8, 9. Wow. Bullets. And they're very detailed. Like some of them are, these people are likely to be focused on generating leads and conversions. They're tasked with driving business results. Another bullet, and that's only part of it, is be frustrated with low conversion rates from their current SEO efforts. They're struggling to get tangible results. These people are likely to not know what we mean by category keywords, are likely to underestimate the importance. I mean, there's multiple sentences. This is carefully thought out. That's really interesting.
Yeah, I also think that's important, just because most people don't, even when I've prompted, I don't even think of giving it this background information, but the more information you give it, I think we found that it really just helps you get better results from it.
And what's interesting about your prompt is it's not like you said that and then there's space and then you're like, now write this article with this outline. You just hit enter. Like you didn't even really ask this. And by the way, she's showing this on Claude. This may be a separate discussion of comparing different tools. I think we should focus on the process and what we wrote here. But we've noticed that, and we've said this in previous videos this year when we were talking about AI, that Claude writes better, at least in our taste. Is that intentional, Katelyn? That it's not like you wrote this and then you said, and now here are the characteristics of my target audience. Now do X for me or whatever. You just hit enter.
Yeah, it just got to be a lot to put all in one prompt, I guess. I think maybe I was running out of character count or something. What I wish I would have done looking back is asked it like, I mean, it kind of does spit back what it thinks you're saying, which is kind of nice, but I wish I would have asked it more specifically, like, okay, what are you learning from this? Or what are you not going to include because of this or something? You know, I'm not sure. Obviously, I still have more to learn there, but it would have been more interesting to, like, check its learnings, essentially, at this point, which I didn't do. But looking back, I think that would have been helpful. But I think I was just trying to, like, get that out there, and then it spit back a response without me asking for anything or really expecting it to give me anything, and then I did give it this outline.
Yeah, if you scroll back up for a second, it just sort of says, yeah, that's fine. I can help you write this. And then it just is like, I've already structured the article, right? And what's interesting is it says, it doesn't give an outline, but it structures it, and it says the content. And number one of its 5-bullet structure, I guess, is of what it thinks the article should do, acknowledges their current approach and pain points. Benji, that's what you're saying. That's actually kind of interesting. I've never done this. Yeah. Like, as Katelyn's saying, I played around with AI a little bit for the same reason. But I don't think it would have done that.
Yeah, it wouldn't have.
If you hadn't spent 10 bullets or whatever we said, being like, I'm looking to write this article. Here is a ton of information about the people's, like, pain points. And in our writing process for years, we have taught, and you know, in our course and to people on our blog and everything, and to our own team, of pain point resonance and starting these, really understanding the client's pain point. That's really interesting.
And you're saying this, now what you're showing, this is what that sample article was before you gave it the outline or anything? Yes, so it does actually
give more than just this outline.
Oh, it straight up wrote an article?
Yeah, yep.
Without you asking it to write an article. Interesting. That's really interesting. And then it says, like, that it already has its category. What are category keywords is the first H2. Why most B2B SEO falls short, which I would say is probably guided by you doing that. That's actually kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, if you just scan the headers, like, at first glance, I was impressed. I was like, oh, this is interesting.
Yeah. That's how I feel right now looking at this. I haven't seen this before.
Even the how-to part looks pretty interesting.
Yeah, how to identify category keywords. Start with your product category. Yeah. Okay. And then if we keep going in your story, what
was next?
What did you do next?
So then I gave it an outline that I was working on. Let's see if I can see it.
Is that because you looked at what it produced and you were like, you said at first glance it was good, but then you decided it was bad? Or you were just like, no, I already wrote an outline. I'm not going to use what you produced?
Yeah, I think it was missing, if I remember right. It was missing quite a few points and just a lot of detail.
How close is this to an outline that you would typically do for an article?
What she produced, you mean?
Yeah, like I'm curious. Just, I mean, we have a step in our own writing process where we do a questionnaire, and a lot of people do an outline in that step.
Everyone does.
Okay, so everyone does, and I'm just curious. Did you think of the outline slightly differently because you were doing it for AI, or is this pretty close to what you would do in your questionnaire?
That is a very good question. But I'm actually looking at this, and it's saying the sources also highlight that something, and that sounds like Notebook to me. It was constantly referencing sources, and so I'm wondering if I'm missing a step here, and that's what I'm trying to find. But
or you used Notebook to help you create this outline. So you probably fed it some material and then maybe asked for an outline in Notebook.
Benji, we should mention to the audience, they're talking about NotebookLM, which is I don't
another
even know much about
I
it. It's
think
a
it's
Google product.
another Google product. I think both Claude and Notebook are Google products, or Anthropic, I think, is the one who owns maybe
Yeah,
Claude.
Claude is made by Anthropic, and I think which just Google has funded, or Google VC or someone has funded. So there's some relationship between them. But Notebook is straight up a Google product, Notebook LM. And Notebook LM, I forgot how we heard about it, Benji, but it's
I heard about it through a friend, and it's what I heard is it's really good. It's like a research AI. And so what's really interesting about it is compared to ChatGPT or Claude, you can actually drop links in here as sources. So you can upload a YouTube video or a podcast, and it straight learns everything from those sources. And so you could put like 10 different sources. So you could put, let's say, one of our YouTube videos that describes our product. So we have a video on competitor keywords that we've done that explains what competitor keywords are and all of our thoughts around it. And then you could put individual blog posts that Grow and Convert has written in here. And then use it to understand a bunch of information from all those sources and then query it based on that.
Yeah. That's where I found actually Notebook was really helpful with that, because it would only pull from those sources then, whereas like Claude kind of, pulls from wherever and makes stuff up. Like Notebook would actually cite its sources. You can see here, like these numbers reference the sources over here, and I'm not sure how to like get into here. Oh, saved responses are view only, so that's the issue. But I was able to, before, click on these, and it would take me right to where in the source it was pulling that from. And so I found that it produced better content in that way, where it was more accurate and more detailed, and sometimes it would even pull details from the sources that I had forgotten. And so that was a nice thing, because it's able to like keep track of all the details better than a human mind in a lot of ways.
Hold on. This is actually a really big point. I'm thinking about this as the person who's been reviewing those survey results of the 50 writers and writing up the analysis of that. And I don't recall, and I've read every single long form response to our questions on that. I don't recall anyone mentioning this. I mean, as Benji is quick to note, I also have the worst memory ever created. So I reserve the
No,
right to
but I think this tool is something that most people don't know about yet. It's pretty new. I think when we started using it, I think it was the first week or month that it was really getting
Really?
traction. Yeah, no, it was, we were really early onto it. I mean, it might have been around for a while, but I think people were just starting to talk about this, and I think even still most people don't know about it, because it's not like ChatGPT where it's you use it for, I don't know, solving math problems and just doing anything that you want. It has a pretty specific purpose, which is
Which is this
uploading.
research summarization thing. Give it a bunch
Yeah.
of sources, and then so let me just say the big picture again that I want to emphasize that Katelyn said, and then we'll get into the details of what we're showing on the screen here from Notebook for everyone, including people that are viewing, because they may be like, what's going on here? A huge thing is that Katelyn said this Notebook takes a bunch of sources that you give it, and it, like, the purpose of what it's doing and what Benji's saying is like, it seemed the vibe we're getting, and I think Notebook's like landing page, Benji, is consistent with this, is that it's almost like for students. That it says, like, if you're researching this thing, what you can upload a ton of stuff, your videos, some class worksheets, or I don't know what you do, but like you put all the materials, and there's like 3 columns we're looking at. That's the left column, and then on the rightmost column, what is that, Katelyn? Is like it's summary of all of that.
Yeah, it's understanding of everything that you gave.
So you don't have to like ask it to do anything. It just
The notes,
yeah.
this is pieces of the chat that I was able to save.
Yes, so you can go back, but you can ask it like its understanding of the various sources and stuff.
So the way it works is you upload as many sources as you want on something, and then you can chat with it and like query that. Is that the idea?
Yeah.
So like, yeah, you can see here with these questions.
And and so that's what the bigger picture is like. This is a huge difference that you should be thinking about if you're exploring AI assistance in writing. ChatGPT, Claude, the two big other ones, is you're writing something, and when you ask it, either of those two, like to help you write it, it's drawing from its like huge amount of training data, which has basically been fed of like every written work or whatever in human history, plus like Reddit and the web now and all this stuff, right? And so that's why Claude in that first example gave a draft basically of a category keywords post without Katelyn having asked it to. Because it's like category keywords, yeah, it's in my training data of what like the internet has said about it and humans have said about it historically. And I think that's been our Grow and Convert's frustration, is that a thesis of Grow and Convert that's so strong to our philosophy in content marketing is interview subject matter experts and the brand and express their views in our pieces. And when we use the term Google research paper in kind of a derogatory or mocking way, and you can Google that exact phrase and cite growandconvert.com to figure it out, is we're saying everybody else, this mirage content we've been talking about, is writers just always kind of regurgitating what the first few results on Google say about a topic, which are beginner levels. And no matter what topic you're writing about, it's beginner level. And so if you use Claude and ChatGPT to write without feeding it a bunch of information, you end up doing that Google research paper, but just AI assisted version of it, because Claude and ChatGPT are just going to regurgitate what they've been fed on a particular topic. So if we, Grow and Convert, have a very specific view of this term category keywords, that view is not going to be expressed if you asked Claude and ChatGPT to write it, unless you very carefully hold their hand to exactly what you want it to say, and you teach them that, because they're going to resort to like what the entire internet has said before you. Versus NotebookLM is only, it just takes the sources you give it, and then you can chat with it, and it's just drawing upon those sources to answer all of your questions. So then you can build an outline that's based on the knowledge from the things you give it, which is very different.
This is bringing it back now. Going back to the outline or working with Claude, is the article that it gave me, it was missing all of that unique voice or messaging that is, in all of these resources over here.
Yeah.
From your episodes, from, the articles we've written, everything.
It's much more than voice. It's the argumentation.
It's all the arguments.
Yeah,
and so that was the difference. Even when we thought about how do we use AI to write, we thought this was very important, was to give it all of our past information. So to give it videos on category keywords where we describe category keywords in detail, to give it pain point SEO, which category keywords is a part of that framework. So if it has all these different sources of our arguments around what category keywords are, then it should be able to write a much better post than if you were to try to query AI to write it without all this information.
Yeah.
I would say better in the sense that it's more accurate. The arguments are more what we want them to be. But what I did run into with Notebook is that, like, you can't change the language of it. You can't tell it, like, write in a, professional but casual tone. I tried to even at one point, I mentioned earlier that it would constantly like say, from this source, such and such a thing. Like, I tried to specifically tell it, don't ever mention a source, don't use the word source, and it kept doing it. So there's certain...
But it's not a writing tool, right?
Yeah.
It's
right,
like
right, exactly. And so that's where I did keep using Claude, and I would feed it, as we saw here, like what I was able to pull from Notebook, then I would feed it into Claude and see if it could give me the same information, but in a, tone, I guess, that I wanted.
I will say, I noticed that in the survey responses of other writers that are using AI, there was a decent amount that liked using ChatGPT. No, not a single person I think mentioned NotebookLM. So you're right, Benji. Like, I didn't realize it was that new, but we seem to be the ones hijacking a like student research tool for writing, because it's so important to us that you form content pieces based on background information from the brand. a lot of people liked it, ChatGPT, because they actually liked querying the internet because they don't have those sources. I'm just noticing like a lot of the writers who are responding to the survey, it's like they're being tasked to write Google research papers. This is what clients are paying them for. Like that's what they're given, and they're like, well, this is how I make my like this is what I'm being asked to do. And so I almost don't blame them. We're like, and that's what we've said forever is clients are literally like, here's a keyword. Look forward to the post. And it's just like they're not a I don't know, like a CrossFit expert, but the client is a CrossFit, equipment brand, and they need to write this thing. And so they're just like, okay, like I'm gonna write this fitness thing, and they're not the fitness expert. So it's almost convenient to them that they can be like, hey, Claude, write about this thing. Because they would normally have to Google step one, then kind of summarize their own findings in some fashion, however they do it, step two, then consolidate that in their heads and write it, step three. That's like been traditional writing process for humans forever. And this kind of lets you do all three steps in one.
Yeah, I mean, I can see from that point of view it being really attractive. And it
Yeah.
could be worth getting through the pain of learning how to prompt it if suddenly you can produce 10 times as many articles. I don't
Right.
know
Right.
what's realistic
But
there.
but if you are a brand or a writer or whoever that wants to up level your writing, because if you do it in that way, if you're asking ChatGPT and Claude to also give you the background information, to also do the web research basically, and write in one, like you tell me all of the arguments in this post. Like give me a thing on category keywords. By definition, is going to just summarize what the average of what the internet has said on category keywords in the past. Like if that's not good enough for you, like it's not for us, and you want to implement the brand's perspective, then like this is actually very, very necessary. You either need to do what Katelyn's saying she did for this experiment, which is use some other AI tool like NotebookLM to do the summary of, and she had on the screen, like, you must have had what, 10 things on there in NotebookLM? You had like multiple YouTube videos, multiple articles that we had published. That's a lot. Multiple articles and YouTube videos. So if you want to do it that way and you're uploading a bunch of your client or your company's information, you either need to figure out how to do that inside ChatGPT and Claude natively, which would be like they're not going to accept YouTube videos, right? Or like podcasts, so you're going to need to like copy and paste or transcribe them.
Yeah, the difference would be in Claude, you would have to copy and paste the entire text of the article or the transcript from videos.
And then you need to tell Claude, you need to be, in my experience, you need to be very careful and be like, use only these are the arguments from in here. You need to ask it first, like summarize this, and then be like, now write something using only this information. Otherwise, it's gonna just grab stuff from its training data. All right, this is very interesting. Let's keep with the chronology. So you've used Notebook to kind of summarize all of the stuff that Grow and Convert has said on these topics, and then you fed that back into Claude.
Yes, yep, so that's what this is here that I pasted that in. If I remember right, I didn't use just the raw outline, I guess, that Notebook gave me. I did edit it some, and I picked and choose some things, and then, you know, put that in here. So it wasn't just straight AI tool to AI tool, if that makes sense.
If you weren't tasked here, if we hadn't said, hey, Katelyn, help us do an experiment of writing this with AI, was the Notebook part where it like summarized all of this past kind of content from Grow and Convert into like an outline? And like, was that even helpful? Or because you are a Grow and Convert team member, and this information in your own head by hand about what category keywords are, how we use them, blah blah blah, because you do this day, but would you have just done it yourself and you created the outline yourself?
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head there, is that since I'm in this every day, I know this one well enough that I would have just done it myself. I can see it being super helpful for onboarding a client or working with a new account or something like that where I don't know anything about the industry or the product, because there's a lot of information to keep straight there. But yeah, with Grow and Convert, it's especially this topic is one that I'm pretty familiar with.
That's actually really interesting. Benji, is like, is there a tool that's just like, I don't know, for marketers or for anyone, where it's like just input a ton of the company's information, and it's just like a chat tool that you can just like query it, and it the tool basically would be like, I'm the company expert on the product or the brand or something. I'm sure this exists.
Yeah, I don't know, but it made me think, like, even for like our onboarding call today with a new client,
Yeah,
putting that into Notebook and just getting a summary of all the key points about the client
I
would
was
be pretty
thinking the
interesting.
exact same thing because we
Yeah.
had that call this morning. Is like, it just, you could just create this, and then that content strategist would have, you can just start querying this thing. Anyway, that's an interesting aside. So
I've actually
you,
done like a manual version of that for a few clients where I'll have what I call like a master list or a Cliff Notes version of like everything that we've learned from the client. And it'll be like, these are our main audiences that we usually write for. Here are each of their products and how we usually talk about them. The different, sometimes
yeah,
we talk about it like this, sometimes we talk about it like that.
yeah.
So it would
Yeah, yeah,
be,
I've seen those. Like, so you're saying you've just created a Google Doc where you've just started summarizing and being like, this is how we talk about everything. Yeah, and AI would be a good use case. Okay, so let's see what Claude wrote after all of this work you've done with multiple tools, and then some examples of kind of what you edited. Yeah, like let's start with this intro.
and so notably here, like even this edit that I'm replacing some of this text with is still written by AI. It was just, I took this sentence and asked it to rewrite it in one of the tools, most likely Claude, or expand on it in some way. And then I liked what it gave better on one of those variations or iterations.
Yeah, that to me still sounds like some artifact of it, this being kind of like an let's try to write with AI experiment. That probably, like, if you were doing this naturally and you were just like, well, I just want to save some time and have AI help me. If it gave you an intro sentence and you were like, I kind of want to say it in a different way, you would just rewrite it, right? You wouldn't then go back and be like, actually do this. I don't know, maybe you would.
Right. No,
Yeah.
no, definitely not. There was a lot more re-prompting that I was doing because I was trying to leave as much of it in pure AI as I could. And essentially here I was just choosing the best of the AI that I was able to prompt
Okay.
and then putting
Well,
it
that makes me
in.
feel better because there are some parts that we'll talk about in a second where I said, "Oh, finally, there's some like good Caitlin level writing." Like, to jump to the end, then after you did this and you created this draft, which you both edited yourself and kind of like used AI to edit, as you're saying now, which is like you don't like the sentence because we were doing this kind of AI experiment instead of just doing what you naturally would have done, which is rewrite it. You then asked Claude to rewrite it several times, and you took the best version and then you sent it to me. I'll say my initial reaction was like, if my first reaction was like, "Oh, this is pretty good," and then as I started editing and reading it, me knowing that Caitlin normally is like a great writer, I started to get annoyed. Where I was just like, "Man, I gotta like edit like all this stuff," and if Caitlin had just written the piece, I wouldn't have to edit all this. So I felt like a noticeable, a very noticeable decrease. But what Caitlin's kind of smiling about is in some parts I was like, ooh, finally, like a Caitlin sentence. It's much better. And she was like, actually, AI wrote that. But what I feel better about is what you're saying right now, which is you're saying AI wrote it, but it's because much of this you asked it to write over and over again because you were doing this experiment and you just took its best response. So that to me is like half AI written, half Caitlin massaging AI to write properly.
Yes, definitely. And if we get into some specifics here, like as I was writing the article, I did start at the top and I went down through the sections using AI. So towards the end, I was getting better at using AI and I was learning like when it was useful to use Notebook versus Claude and how to ask it for what I wanted and just how to use the tools. So it was getting a lot easier and I was getting better at using AI. And that's where, let's see, where is it? You had left a comment.
Where I said, "Oh, this is refreshing to see Caitlin writing," or
Yeah, you had said, I don't know if what it is, but this seems better. Yeah. So you said, I'm curious now to look at your videos in the other doc and see how much AI was used in this section. It could be that I'm mentally exhausted by this point, but it feels better than the rest.
Mm. I actually didn't know this. We hadn't, or maybe you had told me and I've forgotten, but if I feel like I'm learning this for the first time now, that comment was on October 31st. Ooh, I left that comment on Halloween. But I'm learning this now on January 30th. So you're saying the reason I felt like, oh, it's getting much better was because you were just getting better at this whole thing of using AI.
Yes, and so the other piece that's interesting is that I was doing less, like I was giving it smaller chunks to work on. So I would prompt something, give it a prompt in Notebook and then a prompt in Claude. I'd go back and forth. And then I had like all of these versions, and I would essentially like take a sentence here, take half a sentence there, and I was like Frankensteining it together, like just
Hmm.
quilting it together. And so,
Did that save you time, you think?
no, goodness, no.
Okay, so you just did this because this was our like experiment, our project is to try to
Yeah, and
write.
it was interesting. I was interested to see if I went through this work of like just pushing through and figuring out how to use this new tool, if it could save me time in the future. I think it's going to take a lot more. I almost feel like it's almost like starting over.
Wait, explain that. What do you mean? What is like starting over?
Like it reminded me of being a new writer at Grow and Convert, where I
Oh.
was just like trying to wrap my head around everything and like produce what I needed to produce and understand all of the edits I was being given and all of that. Like it's, different. It's uh, different mental muscles that you're using here.
So if we said, "Hey, Caitlin, for client work," which I know Caitlin doesn't do client work. Her role now is more coaching other strategists to do client work. But let's just pretend that you were just like a strategist doing, and you had like three or four clients at Grow and Convert, and we just said, Grow and Convert policy, we're using, you guys can just use AI as much or as little as you need. From just this one experiment, would you use it? Do you think it would save you time, just left to your own devices, to do Grow and Convert level client work?
I would like to experiment with it a little bit further, but it would be in a much different way than I was doing with this article.
What way? I think that would be useful to hear.
So I think the things that I would use it for are, sometimes I'm debating between how I want to arrange the arguments, if that makes sense. Like, what's the most logical flow? Do I want to talk about this first, or do I want to talk about that first? Does this argument make sense in this section or a different section? And so just feeding the tools an outline with like both flows of logic or flow, sets of arguments, if that makes sense, and seeing what it shoots out helps me make that decision as to like how do I want to arrange these arguments, because even if it's not written well, I can kind of get a feel for, oh, I like the flow of this better. And then I would disregard everything like it had written and I would go and write it myself. But sometimes just having that like bouncing board, I guess, for how do I want to arrange this, it can be interesting in that way.
You wouldn't get that feeling from just the outline itself, like seeing the outline. You're saying turning the outline into written prose gives you more clarity of how you should structure a piece, even
Yeah,
if that written prose is so bad you would rewrite it anyways.
sometimes. Yeah. And not all
That's
the
really
time, but
interesting.
sometimes.
Yeah. And I saw that in the survey responses too of different writers. Is like one thing I learned from the survey responses is I used to think of it kind of like Benji, how he introed this episode of just like we wrote an article with AI. I used to think of it that like that. Like, is this AI written? Did AI write this? And I realized that it's like it's not so cut and dry like that. It's like people were just like using AI in different ways in their process. And it was like hard to say whether it was something was quote unquote AI written. Some used it for research. Like we said, like if
I could
the
see that being really helpful. Like imagine doing a competitor post and you're using it to just pull information about your competitors. Like who are the top 10 competitors in the space? And
I
and
actually
hit
have done that.
yeah, and historically you would have had to go Google those people, find out which ones are the most common ones. So like that is how I could see this being really helpful, is to help with specific pieces of the process, whether it's to help you do the outline in the very beginning by giving it sources and then coming up with an outline, or if you need a list of different companies in the space and you just want to use AI to do that portion of it, that could be really helpful. I can see like almost like workflows for different types of blog posts, like whether it's a list post or something like that. There's different ways that you can use AI in parts of the process. It doesn't necessarily mean you need to write the entire blog post with AI.
Or any of it.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
The other thing I use it for is to like polish sentences. Honestly, I still don't even use what it suggests to me. I'll, take a sentence where I'm like, this sounds a little bit funny. It's not quite how I want to word it, but, I can't think of another way to say it right now. And so I'll feed it to it, give it a little bit of a prompt about like the style I'm looking for, and ask it to spit out half a dozen options. And usually, again, it's this Frankenstein version where I'm taking half of this sentence, half of that sentence, a word here, a word there, and building an entirely new sentence. So it can be helpful in that way to just kind of break you out of the usual way that you write something, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I've used it for that kind of copywriting help. I think ChatGPT and Claude, they're great thesauruses in that respect. You're like, I'm trying to say this thing, the word's not coming to me, or like, what are like 5 options or 10 options for this headline, and it'll just do it instantly. And I agree completely with what you're saying. Is I often don't use any of them verbatim, but it says something that I'm like, oh yeah. It was something like that I was kind of searching for in my head. And in
Yeah,
the
it
research
gives you
one,
inspiration and ideas
right?
that you can go off of. Yep.
And in the research one you said, Benji, is interesting in that what's useful about these chat tools is it's like Google Plus. Google, you like search something and then you get like what other pages on the web have said, and then you have to click into each page and you need to read it. And sometimes those pages just have a bunch of nonsense that you don't need anyways, right? And like the famous one that everyone complains about is like recipe blogs. Everyone just wants the recipe, but there's always that stuff above the recipe that everyone has to scroll through, right? And it's like whatever. And that's Google's fault because Google's somehow using that to rank. And you can be like, just give me the recipe and it'll do that. That's the same thing with the competitor research. It's like a research tool plus you can kind of chat with it. And it's like smart in that respect. I would love to show a few examples of kind of writing and what I edited when I received it and what I started to kind of annoy me. And I think this will be a good lesson to maybe close this with, in that I think some of these are lessons for human writers, in the sense that we see some of these, I'm just going to call them mistakes or issues, just like not great writing in writers that apply, in new writers that we work with. And I'm just going to create a blanket name for all of this, and I'm going to call it kind of filler language. Like it's language that the English is perfect. There's nothing grammatically wrong with it. And then it is beyond that. Just like we said, mirage content sounds like it should be good. This is kind of like the micro mirage. It's like mirage writing. It's like at the sentence level, you're like, yeah, it sounds like it makes sense. And then you're like, what does that actually say? And you're like, I don't know. So for example, we're in this section about category keywords that, and Katelyn, you have this section talking about like synonyms. So if you're selling accounting software, best accounting software is kind of an obvious category keyword, but there may be just synonyms that Google kind of ranks the same pieces for because they're the same. Like, and I can't think of good ones. So example would be best accounting tools will probably have the same results as best accounting software. Don't hold me to that, but like that's the idea, right? And there's a couple sentences that I was like, what the heck? So at the end, after explaining this, it says, by targeting a variety of synonyms, you can capture a wider audience and increase your chances of ranking higher in search results. And then it continued. I don't know if again, Katelyn, maybe this is you, but you don't write like this. And then it'd be like, while targeting synonyms can increase conversions, it's important to note that you can't always target all the variations with one piece of content, blah, blah, blah. But let's look at that first sentence. By targeting a variety of synonyms, you can capture a wider audience and increase your chances of ranking higher in search results. Sounds fine, but I was like, that's not true. By targeting a variety of synonyms, you don't capture a wider audience. We're talking about synonyms. Like literally what we're saying is just remember that there's multiple phrasings that mean the same thing. Google's smart enough to know it, and it's ranking the same pieces for that. So it's just basically like the same keyword. You need to think of them as the same keyword. So it doesn't capture a wider audience. And then to say, and increase your chances of ranking higher in search results is just, it's not true. And it's very odd phrasing that it doesn't increase your chances of ranking in search results higher in search results. We're talking about different keywords. It increases your chances of ranking for different variants, maybe, but even that you wouldn't really say. And that's just something to watch out for. I have seen this in human writing of people who apply, but it's very common in AI writing. And that's this micro example over and over and over again in my experiment of trying to write the analysis piece of this AI writing survey of 50 plus marketers who are using AI assistants. I just gave up because that is a very specific piece. It's not an SEO piece. It's like a traditional grow and convert brand data analysis piece. We have strong, very specific arguments, and like the takeaways were really interesting. And I just couldn't at some point, I just couldn't take letting AI kind of do this kind of nonsense writing on it. And I gave up because it was like a death by 1,000 cuts. You read it and you're like, yeah, this is a good point. And then after a while, you're like, what? That doesn't quite make sense. You need to pay, if you want to really be like producing good writing, whether you're doing it or AI is doing it, you need to be very careful to stop when you notice things like that and fix it.
And I think that summarizes pretty well I have a reluctance to use AI because like I submitted this article to you, right? So like I worked with AI a lot. I edited it myself and then I sent it to you and then I got it back from you with all of your edits and I read through it again with fresh eyes and I was like, this is embarrassing, David. This isn't me, please. Like, you know what I mean?
See,
like,
so you felt it too.
Yeah, but like when I was writing it with AI, a lot of that I missed because it was like so much better than what AI had originally given me that I was like, oh great, this is amazing. And then I come back with fresh eyes and I'm like, no, it's not. So it's like, I can't trust it. You know what I mean? And I feel like it dumbs me down when I'm using it too
like it
extensively.
affected your taste.
Yeah.
That because you kept reading it, you start to be like, this is good. Like, this is good. And then you get like human writing and then you're like, wait, actually this isn't good.
Yeah, it's because you're when you read it, it sounds good and you haven't thought through all the arguments that you want to say yourself. And so when you see it on paper, you're like, oh, this is pretty good. But then when you think about how you would say it to someone else, that's when it changes. It is somewhat deceiving. I've noticed that myself was when I ask it for something, at first glance, it always looks pretty good because I haven't really thought through myself how I would say it. And what I've noticed is when I write, that's my way of clarifying my thoughts. And so seeing someone else's writing before you've had a chance to clarify your thoughts, it seems a lot better than it actually is.
I want to, instead of ending kind of trashing AI writing a little bit like we're doing right now, which is an important side of the discussion, the one optimistic side that I'll say is there was a response in the survey, and we highlighted this, I think, in our first video this year, where we said we're kind of exploring AI from different angles, from the search angle we talked about with you on the last video, Katelyn, and now on the writing side. There was one respondent that said, a lot of clients don't care about the writing at this level. They can't see the difference. And that's not really what they're hiring us or me for. They just want this piece on this. And so I had a lot of empathy for that. And I thought, we have seen this kind of what we've called, we wrote Mirage content, Benji, like 7 years ago. So we were complaining about blog content being a mirage way before ChatGPT was a thing, right? And it was the same idea that we called it mirage content because you first read it and you're like, this sounds good. And then when you stop and think about what is it actually saying argumentation wise, you're like, this isn't saying anything.
Yeah, it's a function of like things were ranking back then. This was like when you could rank with the roundup post where you get a bunch of people's opinions and compile them in
Oh God.
a
Yeah.
piece, like that kind of stuff. And like the title looks good, and you like read it and you kind of have some understanding of the topic, and you're like, oh, this is decent. But you actually get into the argumentation or like the key points, and you're like, this actually doesn't make any sense.
And we meant it, I think, at a higher level. Like we were saying, like a lot of it is just kind of obvious information and this and that. This AI thing is miragey. That's why I'm saying it's almost not mirage content, it's mirage writing. It's at the granular level. That sentences themselves, you're like, wait a minute, like it's just not true even. Like if you're ranking for synonyms, it doesn't help you reach a wider audience or whatever that second half of that sentence was. It doesn't make sense. But we have a certain standard at Grow and Convert. Like I said at the beginning, where I'm very aware that not everyone does. And so you can use AI in different capacities, and maybe it helps you consolidate your thoughts. Maybe it helps you do research and consolidate that research, and it saves time versus opening 10 million Google results tabs or something like that. Maybe you can give it a really detailed outline where you're like, do not mention any. I've done this. I've tried this, and it's like better. It still annoys me, but it's still better. It's like, don't make a single argument that's not in my outline. Like, just turn this into complete sentences. Like, these AI tools are very good at English. You know what I mean? At like writing. And so there's different ways to use it. And content writing, there's like a bajillion people in the world. They're all doing it for different things. So there's ways where you can kind of make it work. But at the highest levels where of marketing writing, where the phrasing and the positioning and the messaging about your product and its features and exactly how the feature is differentiated versus status quo or competitors, when that really, really matters, it breaks down. That like human writing is important, and even within humans, we see clients debate about exactly how to phrase that, and so that's
we debate it too. Like when we're doing Grow and Convert posts, there's a lot of back and forth in terms of how we want to say something and how we want to position something. And even with this project itself, that was why we wanted to do it with a Grow and Convert piece first, because to us, that's the hardest thing that we're going to be able to produce. If we're okay to publish AI on Grow and Convert, then it's likely we can do it for clients too, because the amount of editing that we have and the amount of back and forth is much greater than any client.
Yeah. So like, even if we're being a little bit snooty about it, that's fine. And if you're like, well, my clients don't care, I'm going to use it. I think like, go for it. Like if it's helping you out, like go for it. But I will say, like, Katelyn, I feel kind of what you were getting at, but maybe not saying directly, is I enjoy writing. Like, I think a lot of people also are annoyed by it. And so you see like people that are not freelance writers using AI for writing assistants because they have different positions and they're just like doing writing and it just is stressful for them, or they are annoyed by it. That's fine. But for me, like there's like a craft, there's like a struggling fun of trying to figure out the puzzle of like, I want to say it in this way and what are different phrasings, and it definitely takes from that. But this was super interesting. Thanks for sharing all this.
If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe. You can also get the audio-only versions of these shows wherever you get your podcasts. And you can follow us at growandconvert.com/newsletter for any articles and updates for when these videos come out.